The Ghost of Dibble Hollow by May Nickerson Wallace. Chapter 6. Miles's Story. Bedtime seemed to come at a snail's pace that evening. Pug didn't want to go up to his room earlier than usual, for he didn't want to arouse anyone's curiosity. But he found it hard to settle down and do anything downstairs. He was so restless that his mother felt his forehead to see if he had a fever. His father, too, looked at him over his glasses when Pug rose as the clock struck 9 and said good night and went upstairs. Pug shut his door quietly and listened to make sure Helen had gone to her own room. Suddenly, a cold breath blew on the back of his neck. A deep voice imitating Eb Smith said in his ear, "Boy, come down." Pug whirled about. Miles was sitting by the window in the rocker. "Come down out of that tree, boy," he said again in a deep voice. "Okay, have your fun," Pug said coldly, "and when you're through goofing off, I have a few questions to ask you." "You are my brother Nathaniel all over again," Miles laughed. "Why? How? When? A living question mark." "I knew you would hunt up Fanny Woodman, and I can guess what you want to ask." "You followed us over there," Pug accused him. "Her chair didn't rock like crazy all by itself." "I was there for a minute or two," Miles confessed with a grin. "I knew you'd go see her, and she would tell all. Fanny was always a gabber." "She certainly believed in you. She said she was sure you hadn't taken the money." Miles looked shamefaced. "That was when I was sorry I rocked her chair and burned her old cookies," he admitted. "I couldn't resist it when she said I was sweet on her." Pug was impatient. "Tell me, was there really someone following you and Eb Smith that night?" "There certainly was. Eb thought he got them off his trail, but they were too foxy for him. They doubled back and went after me." "Then what?" "I didn't have much a head start, but I thought I could outwit them by crossing the river on the old wooden bridge." "You mean that broken-down bridge that isn't used anymore?" "There was no other way in our day. Eb and I played on that bridge plenty of times, but only in the daylight. The night of the fair, it was black as pitch. I was barely ahead of the thieves when I got to the bridge. I doubled my pace and missed my footing." Pug gasped. "Wow! Did you drop all the way to the river on those rocks?" Miles rubbed his head and nodded ruefully. "The next thing I knew, those two villains were bending over me, and one of them said, 'He's done for all right.' Is the money on him?" Miles laughed silently. "You should have heard them when they found nothing but a few pennies and my new mouth organ that I'd bought at the fair." He started pulling the old one out of his pocket, but Pug stopped him. "Go on, Miles. Tell me what happened." "I tricked them on the money, slick as a whistle." "How?" Miles continued as if he hadn't heard the question. "The other one said, 'He's as dead as a mackerel, and you could bet your bottom dollar we'll be suspected if we hang around here. I'm getting out.'" Miles stopped as his eyes clouded over. "Go on," said Pug. "Go on with the rest of the story." "Well, all right, but you must remember, it's an old story for me and a rather painful one," he sighed. "First, the villain shoved me out into the river current so that my body would be carried out to sea, but he got caught on a pier and was fished out by a Mr. Miller down in Milltown. He had me buried, just as if I had been his own son." His twangy voice had softened as he mentioned Mr. Miller. All of him disappeared except his face. "Miles, don't go, don't go," Pug cried. "Who said I was going to go anywhere? It's just that I feel so carried away at this point in the story." Pug breathed a sigh of relief. "What happened then?" "I came back here. When I saw how much trouble my disappearance had caused, I could not rest until the Smiths and Dibbles were friends again." "You and me both, Miles. But the money? You said you'd tricked the crooks." "So I had. I could make scarcely any speed in these boots, with the weight of the gold on me, so I hid it." "Hid it?" Pug was breathless. "Then all you have to do is help me find the money and get it back to Mr. Smith. Then everything will be okay again between our families." "It's not so easy to make everything hunky-dory as you suppose." "Why not?" Miles looked uncomfortable. "The matter of fact is that I can remember as plain as day what those ruffians said and how they cussed when they threw down my new mouth organ. But I'm not certain just where I hid the gold." "Oh, no." "If you had the living daylights knocked out of you, I dare say you would not remember any better than I do," Miles pointed out. "But why didn't you get a hold of Eb right then and there? Why didn't you show yourself to him just as you did to me? Maybe the two of you could have figured out where the money was." Why? Because I'm not able to appear to anyone but a Dibble under 15, with a kind of simple mind, I might add. I should think you could remember that. I told you this once before." Yes, I do remember. Pug was contrite. Just me and one other special person, you said. He went on hurriedly, afraid Miles had been offended and would suddenly disappear. Can't you look the countryside over in daylight and let me know where to hunt for the money? I've been looking Twin Maples over for 60 years, and I'm confused every time. Eb and I had an old secret hideout. I tried that first thing, but I could never really have got that far that night. The hideout is high on the rock ledge. He hesitated. I do seem to remember that I put the money sack in a tree, but my sense of direction was never good. In a tree? Oh, fine. There are only 1,000,000 trees on the Smith place, Pug groaned. I don't see much hope of getting the Smiths and the Dibbles together unless you remember which tree. Miles sighed. You're my only hope, Nathaniel, and I've been waiting for you for a long time. Pug sighed too. Maybe I could come up with something. I'll work on it. But go on, tell me about the Milltown part of the story. Have you ever been to Milltown? No. Has any of your family ever been there? No. It's not too far to go on that newfangled bicycle of yours. I'm buried in the Gore Cemetery. At the far corner from the gate is the Gideon Miller plot. Next to the fence is the grave where Mr. Miller had me buried. He buried me like his own son, because the boy had been lost by sea, and he'd hoped someone would do the same for him. They were silent for a moment. What I can't understand, Miles, is how Mr. Miller could have done that in a town within bicycle distance, and no word of it ever got back here to Twin Maples and Dibble Hollow. Then folks would know what happened to you, if not to the money. Miles took out his mouth organ and was playing an eerie melody that made Pug's ears ache. He stopped long enough to look at Pug pityingly. I said a rather simple mind, did I not? He murmured. Did you ever stop to think what this country was like 60 years ago? Dirt roads, no automobiles, no telephones around here. Letters were slower than molasses in January, and no one but an Indian ever traveled the tumbling river. He knocked his mouth organ against the palm of his hand. His whole face lighted up with a grin. There is a good joke on the family, though, he chuckled. They actually had word of where I was buried, and they never knew it. Don't ask me any more. He raised his mouth organ again, but thought better of it, and instead began to sing. Oh, I was down to old Milltown. 'Twas just the other day. I saw the biggest ram, sir, that was ever fed on hay. And if you don't believe me, and if you think I'd lie, just you go down to old Milltown and see the same as I. The horns upon his head, sir, they reached up to the moon. 2 butchers went up in January and didn't come down till June. And if you don't believe me, and if you think I'd lie, just you go down to old Milltown and see the same as I. The man that killed the ram, sir, was drowned in all the blood, and 15,000 soldiers were carried away in the flood. And if you don't believe me, and if you think I'd lie, just go down to old Milltown and see the same as I. Where did you get that, old weirdie? Pug asked, laughing. Oh, my father used to sing it. It came out in the Milltown News when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Miles yawned, and suddenly he was gone. Pug had the queerest feeling that Miles disappeared into the cavern of his own mouth. Stay tuned for Chapter 7.